Hello and welcome to Bolt Action 1944, folks. And today I want to go over some of the changes that we've seen in version 2 to version 3. Got a little slideshow. I'm not going to cover everything that's changed because there's so much that has. I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the stuff that has changed. So with that, please do all the YouTube things. Please like, share, subscribe. Channel's doing pretty well. I'm almost up to 60 subscribers, which is not too bad inside of a year. So I appreciate all that. And let's see. Let's go ahead and start this right here. So here we go. And Bolt Action version 2 to version 3, major differences. All right. Number one, activation dice. This hasn't changed. This is one thing that hasn't changed. Even though it's here, I wanted to go ahead and just, put this out here. Everything's pretty much the same. All right. The shooting phase. Okay, so this is pretty much the same, but some of the shooting has changed. Number one, you declare the target. Your opponent gets to react. Measure to target. So we no longer have long range, which affected shooting, which is a huge change, really. Long range pretty much allowed for the Super 7 rolls that we used to have, which everybody hated. So there's quite a few changes to it. The base is now different. Used to be 3+, now it's 4+. So we're gonna calculate the hit modifications. If they moved, if it's pinned. So pinning is a big change. Back in version 2, if you had 4 or 5 pins, you pretty much couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. If you had 2 pins, it was pretty hard. Inexperienced is another one. Another change is point blank range is now +2, which is huge. It's very dangerous to being in point blank range and being shot, especially if you're out in the open and you get no cover saves, which is one of the changes. We now have cover saves. So base to hits 4+, you roll how many dice that you get to shoot with, and then you roll to wound. And then however many wounds you have, the opponent's going to roll cover saves if they get cover saves. So if they're in soft cover, they're going to be a 5+. Hard cover 4+. Down is going to be a +2 modifier unless you're point blank. And that's another reason point blank is so dangerous, because the +2 goes away. You don't get that. So if you're out in the open and down, you're going to get shot to pieces. You pretty much pick your models up and turn in your order dice, because that unit's going to go away. Same thing with models. If they take more than 50% casualties in one attack, then they're going to have to take a morale check. So that hasn't changed. Close quarters. This is another change that is huge. In version 2, it was very easy for the attacker to swing first, and especially if you had Gurkhas. If you had assaulted somebody out in the open, they pretty much didn't get to swing back. It was almost a done deal. So now it's always going to be at least simultaneous. And if the defender is in a defensive position behind an obstacle, they get to swing first as you come in. So that can be pretty bad. They're going to take away your guys, especially if they get closing fire. So if you're charging in, taking closing fire, losing guys, they swing first, you're going to lose some more guys. You're probably going to lose that every time. So that's one of the reasons the close quarters is pretty much gone away in version 3. And then point blank. So even if you're successful in the close combat, you're left probably pretty close to point blank to other units around that might shoot you to pieces after that. So yeah, like I said, Gurkhas and Polish Lancers are about the only two units in the game that can actually pull off an assault, unless you're just attacking the headquarters unit or a sniper team or something small, with a another squad. Uh, just nobody wants to do it anymore. So that's major changes to close quarters. Headquarters, this is a big change. The points cost, they dropped the points cost big time. It used to be that nobody took company commanders, captains, majors. Just didn't happen. The headquarters unit was strictly considered attacks, which try to limit how many platoons you take so you don't have to pay so many headquarters taxes. But now they've actually become useful. Their morale bonus has gone up significantly. A +2 bonus for a regular lieutenant is pretty good. You get extra orders. You get another extra order, which in version 2, they only got one. And it was like trading dice. So there was no sense with a lieutenant to do a snap 2. It just didn't make sense unless, really was. If you had a captain or a major, then you got enough orders that you could do it, but they were so expensive that nobody brought one. When I first started playing, I brought a captain with my American forces. It worked okay, but I quickly figured out that was not an efficient use of points, and I dropped him from my army pretty quick. Like I say, the increased snap too. So with your company commanders now, you get 4. With Germans, you get 5. So this actually makes them more useful. You can actually snap to, a useful amount of extra men. So, yeah, like I say, they're not attacks, but they have a meaningful role. The morale bubble, because of the amount of pins that can be put out now in the game, because shooting is so much more effective. You don't no longer pretty much, unless you're inexperienced, you're probably not going to be hitting on 7s, probably at least 6s. So there's going to be a lot more pins put out. So the officer bonus is huge, especially the captain, the company commander. If you've got one of those in your army, you're probably not failing any morale checks. You're going to keep your whole army moving. They are just so vital now. I don't build an army without a company commander anymore. Another big change is in the transports. In version 2, the officers snap 2 and morale bonus did not work outside the vehicle. So he could only affect units inside the vehicle. And so now, especially him being in a vehicle, it really protects him. Especially if it's an armored transport, he's pretty much safe from sniper fire, any other kind of fire, unless it's heavy weapons, bazooka or an anti-tank rifle, an autocannon. He's safe inside the transport. Plus, one of the big things too is, like, especially with an LVT, the LVT is so huge that, let's take the company commander captain, for instance. He has a 12-inch bubble. Well, if he's on the ground, the bubble extends from him physically. But if he's inside this huge LVT, that bubble extends from every point around that LVT. So not only is he safe inside, he extends his morale bubble just a huge portion of the battlefield. And then if you've got, some lieutenants running around too, and maybe they're in a Jeep, you can put it. So one thing you can do with the lieutenants, and I won't do this with the company commander because it makes him too big of a target, but you can put a lieutenant in a Jeep. So for 14 points, you can make him a super veteran. So he goes from being inexperienced, wounding on 3, to you need a 6 to destroy the Jeep, and then you still got to roll D6 hits and kill him. So for very cheap, you can make him pretty survivable. Plus, he can move around a lot faster. He can do a 24-inch run if he needs to get on the other side of the table and buff, a tank or an artillery piece that needs to activate. Boom, he's over there, +2 bonus to them, and they're good to go. And then another big change too is as the Armies of books comes out, is headquarters units can increase their size to 5 to 6 men, so they can actually become a squad if you really want to do that, especially in a dice cap tournament or a game where you want every dice to do something. Yeah, build your headquarters unit up to a squad. A lot of times they can all take submachine guns too. I think in the Americans, if you pick an airborne, you can actually take 8 men and they can all have submachine guns. So if you want to build an assault squad out of your headquarters unit, you can do that. So that's one way to utilize the headquarters now. Another big change is snipers. Huge change. This is one of the biggest changes to units in the game. In version 2, the sniper could pick out Panzerfaust out of the squad. He could pick out the LMG. Pretty much the reason nobody took MMG teams, because in mortars, really, unless you had a spotter with a mortar that you can hide the mortar, nobody took, because the sniper can take that mortar out in one shot. Now the snipers get a +1 to hit, which brings their base down to 3, but they also get a +1 to damage roll. So they're very likely to cause a wound and a casualty. Nobody gets cover saves versus snipers. So if they roll the damage, they get to pick the team leader, the NCO, the headquarters leader, the lieutenant. They can no longer pick out anybody else in the squad. So in the case of Germans, the Germans just don't care, because they don't lose the morale because their NCO is killed. So they're not as effective against Germans. However, if the German officer has a company commander on this, he gets 5 snap 2s. Snipers definitely going to want to try to take him out, because usually they're inexperienced. It's at 3. Even if he's got extra guys, he can still take him out and remove that snap 2 and the morale bonus that he was giving out to the rest of his army. They did go up a little bit in cost, 2 points, not really a big deal. But I don't know, I don't see a lot of snipers in the games nowadays. But I think if you have the points, I think they're worthwhile bringing, just because you can pick off officers that are doing their thing out there, snap 2s and morale bonuses. You can use these snipers to take them out. So weapons range changes. So howitzers probably got the biggest nerf, really. The minimum ranges from all the howitzers went way up, which was probably a little more realistic, as far as what they did in, real life. They were not a short range weapon. They were lobbing shells out from miles away. So the light howitzer went all the way up to 30 inches. I think it was 24 in version 2, which you could kind of use them as a mortar in a way too. They were dual purpose, especially the British that had the dual purpose gun. It could be a light anti-tank gun or a light howitzer. Plus it had the ability to fire indirect like a mortar, like a medium mortar. So that they were quite good, especially for the cost. But another change is the light howitzers didn't really change much, but medium and heavy howitzers, the ranges went way up and the cost went way up across vehicles and across artillery pieces. So you're seeing you're seeing no heavy howitzers. Very rare somebody brings a heavy howitzer. I think it's pretty much because they just want to put it on the table. Medium howitzers are pretty much gone. So the next weapons change in the range is the heavy machine gun, which is a really good one. It went from 36 to 48, which also extends that half range so that the +1 pin goes all the way out to 24 now. So that can be pretty useful. And another change to heavy machine guns, anti-tank rifles, and autocannons is they don't lose penetration versus infantry and soft skin vehicles. So they can shoot all the way out to their full range with the full penetration, which is kind of good. I mean, it makes vehicles very hard to stay on the table, soft skins anyway. Anti-tank rifle, another huge change, went out to 48 inches. Also pushes that +1 or the +2 penetration out to 24. So you can, with the anti-tank rifle's ability to move and shoot, you can push up and take on armored transports with these things and have a real chance of doing some damage to them. And the cost of the anti-tank rifle is cheap for 25 points. Like some people were saying, you could put 2 of these in your army and they're kind of a sniper because they get that +2 against, infantry out at 48 inches. So if they don't move, you're hitting on 4. If you got 2 of them, say you got an officer nearby, you snap to both of them. If you want to take out an officer or something, they both shoot it at target. 2 chances at rolling a 4, probably going to kill them. So yeah, those are pretty good. The light mortars, another huge change. The minimum range didn't change, but the long range went from 24 to 36 inches. So where you didn't see light mortars at all, unless they were squad based in version 2, now everybody's starting to bring inexperienced light mortars. I've run 4. I've got 4. Sometimes I'll run 2, depending on how I'm building my army. But I'm always including light mortars because they don't offer. One thing about the light mortars, they don't offer. There's no cover save versus them. So you drop a 1-inch HE down on a small team or an artillery piece, you're going to wound pretty often, +1, and they're not going to get a cover save. So they're going to lose guys. You're ranged in. They have to move. If you hit anything like that once, they're done for the game. 21 point unit, you have taken out a 50, 60, 70 point unit. So they're really good. Flamethrowers, here's another huge change from version 2 to version 3. The penetration dropped from +3 to +2, which is not a huge difference. I say that, but against armored targets, that changed from +3 to +2 is huge because it affects a lot of tanks that you could have damaged before where +3, because you always get the coming in from the top armor, you get that +1. So it's actually +4 versus armored vehicles on the top armor, which means a 10 armor tank you can damage, 9 armor tank you can definitely do full damage on. Now it shifts that down to where, if you take a veteran 10 armored tank that ignores pins from flamethrowers because it can't be damaged, then it's going to take a morale check, but it's already veteran, and it's probably the command vehicle or there's an officer nearby. It's not failing order test, so you're just wasting a shot. So and it runs out of fuel on a 1 to 2, so that's a risk. That's a huge risk. Before a 1, you're pretty safe. You're going to get off. Every once in a while you're going to run out of fuel, but 1 and 2, if you shoot it more than once in a game, you're probably running out of fuel. And then also now they take a pin when firing. So the flamethrower team's going to take a pin. And if it's a squad based, then the whole squad's got a pin on them now. So if they're trying to shoot back, they've got a pin. and it can stack up, especially if it's been shot at before and it already has a pin. The whole unit now has 2 pins. And then the other thing about running out of fuel is before the whole flamethrower team goes away, and now you just remove the model. If it's a squad-based flamethrower, then the guy stays and he becomes a rifleman. I believe that's the way that works. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me on that one, but I think that's right. But you don't see a lot of flamethrowers now. It's a huge change, and I've actually run a German barbecue list and did pretty well with it. The Germans have a few bonuses because of their officers' extra snap too. It allows them to be much more effective. Unfortunately, the British, their engineer squads can't take flamethrowers, and I don't understand that at all. So you have to pay tax on an officer, 2 engineer squads that don't do anything, just to get 2 flamethrower teams. So there's 0 British flamethrowers unless you take it on a vehicle. You're never going to see it. I like to run my Wasp because it's a vehicle. It can do other things after it runs out of fuel, and it's fairly cheap for what it does. But yeah, I think the Americans have the best vehicle flamethrowers right now with the Stewarts. They're fairly cheap, and you can actually take one that has an anti-tank gun and a flamethrower, forward-facing flamethrower. So, yeah. Multi-rocket launchers. Okay, so this has gone through a few changes as version 3 came out. There's been a couple of FAQs on it. At one point, they got nerfed so bad that I don't think anybody would ever bring one. But then they kind of changed it a little bit here so that the minimum range is 36, which I mean doesn't matter a whole lot because a lot of times these guys are firing them at the beginning of the game anyway when everybody's spread out, and they're going to take 1 pin when firing, which with officers nearby it's not really a big deal unless you take them inexperienced, and then that can stack up if you get a couple pins on it and it's inexperienced. It might be hard for them to activate. Another huge change is the vehicle multi-rocket launcher. So the Katyushas were hated because they could move and shoot in version 2, which was dangerous because they could be hiding behind line of sight blocking terrain, and then after everybody's moved at the end of a turn, they can just move out and then just start shooting at stuff. And if you're bunched up, that can really add up, especially if they've got 2 or 3 of these things. You can, because in version 2 they were tanks, so I think 2, unless they were playing CeeLo Heights, the most you'd ever see is 2 multi-rocket launchers. But the Germans, they've got some access to some pretty good ones too. They've got a couple vehicle mounted ones, the Nebelwerfer, the Howling Cow. Now with the artillery, so in version 3 now you got the artillery platoons. You can take 4 of these things in one artillery platoon, maybe even 5. And especially if they're Howling Cows, they're super cheap. And basically these guys are looking to just obliterate an army in turn 1 and 2, and then just deal with the rest of it after the smoke is cleared. And another change is now they can use spotters, but they have to be regular or veteran. So I see a lot of people bringing regulars. They're going to be shot at, so why not make them regular, make them a little more survivable for a few more points. I don't know about veteran. I don't think I'd bring one veteran. But artillery and mortars. Okay, so another change to artillery is the gun shield used to give you a bonus to being wounded. So I know I used to take light mortars in version 2, or light howitzers. Sorry. I'd take a veteran because for very few points, you can make a 3-man howitzer veteran, and then you add the gun shield. So it takes a 6 to wound them. And so that's pretty good, especially if they're behind any kind of cover. They can be hard to hit, very hard to wound. But now it just gives soft cover, which, if anybody knows, in version 3, rolling a 5-up cover save is very hard to do. It doesn't happen a lot. So almost not worth taking the gun shield for 5 points. Some of these artillery pieces have the gun shield baked in. Some of them, it's an option. You can take it or you can not take it. Big change to howitzers, HE in general, is the amount of pins generated. So now 1-inch HE does D2 pins, which didn't really change. But the 2-inch HE used to do D3 pins. Now it does D2. And then the 3-inch HE does D3. I believe it did D6 pins. And then the 4-inch HE is D3 pins as well. And I think it was D6 pins. So a huge change in how many pins you can get, which, combined with the officer's morale bonus, kind of negating pins. The pin generation is really not a big thing. The only time I see it really used is autocannons versus armored targets they can't damage, because instead of shooting direct, they'll fire the HE to try to get that extra pin. And with autocannons being cheap as they are, you can gang up on a tank, hit it a couple times with 1-inch HE, and you could have 4 pins on it in one round, and then it's going to have a hard time activating. It's probably going to have to rally, unless there's a company commander nearby. It's probably not activating. Another change is the autocannons. Before, in version 2, multiple hits, if you got multiple hits on a unit, they had to stack. So they had to touch each other. They had to daisy chain the 1-inch bubbles, which kind of limited how many units you could, or how many models you could hit, especially if the unit was stretched out. If they were daisy chained, because you can space them out 1 inch apart, you could hit a unit 4 times with, a quad autocannon, and you may only get 2 or 3 models because of the way they were spaced out. Now you can put that bubble, each one of those, anywhere you want. So 4 hits, you could get everybody in the squad. So another thing is you can't hit a model more than once. So you can't generate more hits than there are models in the squad. So that's another change as well that you could do back in version 2. So indirect fire, you get no cover save. So artillery, if it's a howitzer and you choose to indirect fire it like a mortar, they're not going to get cover saves. And then another reason mortars are so good, especially a medium mortar, 2-inch bubble is going to catch quite a few guys if they're bunched up. I've hit 6 guys. I've even seen 8 if they're really tight packed in, and then +2 to wound with a medium mortar. Veterans are get a 3+ to wound a veteran, anything but a 1 on anybody else, and they get no cover save, so you can wipe out a squad in a hurry with mortars. So mortars are really, I see a lot of people, I don't know, people took inexperienced medium mortars in version 2 just because they were cheap and they did a pretty good job. But I myself, if somebody brought a medium mortar against me, I had DACA tanks that would just hose them down. They didn't last more than a turn or 2. I just go after them, especially with the Recce Jeep for the British double MMGs. It's 10 shots. 10 shots on an inexperienced medium mortar, it's dead. It's going to go away. One round. I kill them all the time with that. Now, That same Jeep only gets 6 shots. They get cover saves, and the we went from 3+ to hit to 4+ to hit. So it's a lot harder to remove these mortars than it was in version 2. So you're seeing a lot more of them. Vehicles, quite a few changes to vehicles. Back in version 2, soft skins were fairly hard to destroy, unless you used heavy weapons against them. So before, you'd have to hit them, you'd have to roll a damage roll of 6, and then you had to roll in the damage chart. Now, they were a little different than armor, because armor, you had superficial. I think you had to get 1 over for armor. Soft skins, you damage it, you roll in the damage chart, full damage. But you still had to roll 4 up. So it was 50-50 shot after you damaged it. Now, if you get that 6, it's gone. It's a little harder to hit them. Went from 4+ to, 3+ to 4+. So it's a little harder to hit, but it doesn't take a lot to knock out a soft skin, especially if you're going to put guys inside of it. It's a risky proposition. I recommend Recce for soft skins if you can do it, just so that they can survive that first volley. It allows you to push guys up. So armored transports, usually in version 2, any transport that was closer to an enemy unit at the end of a turn, the guys bailed out, destroyed the vehicle ran off, whatever, it was gone. Armored and soft skin. In version 3, soft skins still run away if they're closer, but armored transports, they get to do a morale check to see if they stick around. And especially if you've got an officer nearby, they're pretty likely to stick around, which is good, because they've gotten a lot cheaper. Overall, all vehicles have gotten cheaper, and so if an armored transport has a machine gun on, especially allied armies that have the heavy machine gun, they can be very useful, transporting guys up, and then they jump out, and then the vehicle starts shooting, laying down covering fire, especially with a heavy machine gun that can damage, not only wipe out another soft skin, but even an armored transport, +1 penetration. I mean, you're rolling 3 dice. So that's one thing that has changed. Also is the amount of shots from vehicle-mounted weapons versus infantry. It's gone in half. So you don't get quite as many shots, but they are more effective than they were in version 2. So movement. All vehicles get 2 pivots on an advance, 1 pivot on a run, even track vehicles. So this is huge for tracks, because back in version 2, if you had a tank, and it made a run, it could only go straight. It couldn't turn whatsoever. Now it can still make 1 pivot. And on an advance, it could only pivot once. So if you wanted to make 2 turns, you just had to sit still and do 2 pivots, which wasn't really useful at all. You're turning your back to whatever you're trying to get away from, and you can't move. So what it does do for tanks is it allows them to move around obstacles and still get a line of fire and keep their front armor pointed where they want to. Whereas before, you might take that 1 pivot, if it's got a turn, you swing the turn around and shoot at something, but now you've presented your side armor to whatever you're shooting at, and that could be bad. So it's really huge. And in the run is really huge because of an assault. In version 2, if you wanted to assault with a tank, it had to be a straight assault. Because you're having to run, you couldn't make any turns. Now you get a pivot, so you can assault somebody around an obstacle, friendly or whatever, before you can do that. So it makes tank assaults a little more easier to accomplish, especially a fast tank. Now we've got a few tanks coming out that are fast, so they can go 24 inches, make a turn and assault. So that's huge. You can run over artillery pieces, soft skins, pin down infantry. So that can be really useful. The road movement bonus, the tanks no longer get a road bonus if they're fully tracked. That's a huge change. The half tracks still get the double road bonus, as well as wheeled vehicles. Like I say, some vehicles are now fast. There's a German tank, I think a Lux, that's Panzer 1 or 2, Panzer 2 Lux, that is fast. The Hellcat, Chaffee, for the Americans are fast. This can be really useful as far as outmaneuvering an enemy tank and trying to get into its side armor, extra movement, or just straight getting off the board in a situation where you needed to, get off in like an envelopment situation where you score for either getting into the enemy's deployment zone or getting off the board. That extra movement is huge. Something that's really dangerous now for vehicles is any unit really that touches the board edge is counted as destroyed. They run away. Foobar and panic results can cause this. I've seen a bunch of infantry is the worst. If they panic, they're running toward the nearest board edge, and they can run around anything that's in the way. So if they're within 12 inches of board edge, and you roll a foobar and a panic, I've seen a guy it was like a 160-point assault, just kitted out veteran squad sitting within 6 inches of a board edge, had one pin on it, and he rolls a foobar, and they run away. Boom, it's gone. Tanks, very dangerous for any tank that is wrecky. And not so much for fast vehicles, although it does change the math a little bit. But a wrecky vehicle can make a full reverse move at the advance rate. So, especially if it's a fast one. But like a tank is 9 inches. So if it's 9 inches away from the board and you fail morale check, it's going to back up and touch the board edge. But if it's not wrecky, it only goes back 4.5 inches. So you have to be careful how far on you push your units. Being too close to the board edge is dangerous. Another thing about board edges, and a lot of people don't pay attention to, is vehicles pivot on their center. So if you are near a board edge and you make a pivot, now if somebody calls you on this, they're probably being a little too technical. I would just tell the person, you can't go past that. But technically, if they pivot their vehicle and it touches the board edge, that vehicle's gone right then and there. It's gone. And that's rules as written. So you just got to be careful. Also, buildings, and I see a lot of people try to do this. They'll pull their vehicle dead up against a building, and then when they go to turn, they want to turn it and basically just kind of move. They can't do that. You can't touch the building and continue to turn. Once you touch it, you have to back up. So you have to pivot on the center. That's important. You can't just kind of swing the ass end around and get it away from the building. That doesn't work that way. You have to pivot the vehicle on its center. So, everybody pay attention to that. That's critical. The force organization. So this is a huge change from version 2. In version 2, we had generic reinforced platoons. Platoon was consistent of a number of infantry squads, a platoon commander, a lieutenant, a higher commander, which would have been a captain or a major, and then you're allowed to take usually, one anti-tank choice, one mortar choice, one tank choice, one armored car choice, and so on. So it was very limited in what you could do. So if you wanted multiples of some of these things, you had to take extra platoons, unless you're using theater selectors, which most tournaments would not allow theater selectors. It's just asking for madness. So both of those have pretty much gone away in version 3. We now have specific platoons. We have rifle platoons. We have armored platoons. We have artillery platoons. We have engineer platoons. We have recce platoons. And did I mention artillery? I think so. So each one of these has a limit of what they can take. We're not going to go over them, but this is how you build an army now. So it's possible to spam, and this is bad. I almost wish they would go back to generic reinforced platoons, but keep, everything else in version 3, because it would just straight cut out spam. It really would. But now you can take 4 or 5 artillery pieces, multi-rocket launchers. You can take 5 tanks. If you take 2 rifle platoons. So one of the restrictions is to unlock multiples of any of these other platoons, you have to have multiples of a rifle platoon. So you take 1 rifle platoon, then you can take 1 each of everything else. If you take 2 rifle platoons, then you can take 2 of anything else. So it's very possible to put 10 tanks on the table with, a handful of inexperienced infantry and a couple officers. And I mean, that's hard to deal with. It really is. I've run a list with that, and I used Home Guard. Now, the one thing about infantry is it's the only thing that can hold objectives in version 3. So you do have to have some infantry. You're going to have some kind of infantry. Otherwise, you're going to lose the game that has objectives. So scenario charts. So we've gone away from a handful of standard scenarios, and now you can create a custom scenario rolling from the book, mixing in different deployments, zones, deployment types, and victory conditions all together. So it allows for a wide variety of scenarios. As we got here, victory conditions, seek and destroy, which is, just a kill point mission, key positions, that has changed. So number of objectives that you can put on the table has gone from like 3 to 5, I think, to now you can have up to 7. And it's also more likely, I think the minimum you're going to have is 5. It's D3 plus 4. So the minimum you're going to have is 5. And you can have 5 to 7. So 7 objectives, that's a lot of objectives. Breakthrough is your double envelopment scenarios, basically trying to get off the board or into deployment zones. Top secret. So top secret, it's changed a little bit, but it's still one of those ones that's it's not a very good tournament scenario. Demolition has changed a bit, makes it a little more playable. In version 2, if you were touching the enemy base at the end of any turn, game's over. Now, if you're within 3 inches of the objective, I believe, and every unit that's within 3 inches rolls a 4, 5, or 6 on the dice, and they can't be down, and they can't have a rally order. They just have to have, I think, either a fire advance on their dice, and they can do a roll to see if they destroy the base. If not, the game continues if the other guy doesn't get it. So a lot more draws in demolition, whereas before it could be a quick win. It really could. Hold until relieved. This is one where you're kind of deployed. It's an attacker defender deal, and it's not really good for tournaments where defender gets to set up like half his units. But so once you roll for your victory conditions, now you roll for your deployment zones. So you'll either have long table edges or you'll have quarters. So, you can mix that in with any of these scenarios up in 1 through 6. And then the deployment type. So now you can mix meeting engagement, which is where you advance onto the board, or prepared positions, where you place your units down before the game starts in your deployment zone. So that will change from whether you got long table edges or quarters. Table quarters is pretty huge where you can deploy. Long table edges is just 12 inches in. You deploy your guys in there. And then deployment type of fog of war, which is a horrible tournament scenario. I think half your units can go into reserve, and they can come in on any table edge. Now in version 2, fog of war, which is really a little bit more sane, you can't come on a board edge where your opponent just came on. You have to pick a different table edge. So that kind of mitigated the madness we're seeing now, where it's fog of war. You can come in right behind your opponent and shoot tank in the rear with a bazooka or an anti-tank rifle even. I've knocked out tanks with heavy machine gun, a scout car coming in with 3 shots from a heavy machine gun, getting the point blank bonus penetration plus to hit and the rear armor, and I've knocked out tanks with that. So fog of war is pretty crazy. So that's how you can mix things up. Some guys will just do it random. If you're playing a friendly game, and we're just going to roll everything up random. Usually in tournaments, the TO's already decided, on how these things are going to shape out, and he's built his scenarios, and usually they've got it to where it's more fair and competitive. So damage charts. So now we have a superficial damage chart, whereas before a certain roll you scored superficial damage, and then other rolls, 1, 2, 3 it was superficial, 4, 5, 6 it was full damage. So now once you damage a vehicle, if it just meets the armor, then you're going to roll on the superficial damage chart. And then there's all these things, different things that can happen. Before we only had like 3 things that were superficial. Now we've got a bunch. We've got steering, crew stun, which is pretty much the same. We've got steering compromise, which limits the turns that you can make. Turret jam. That used to be optional. Turret jam. Some TOs used it, some didn't. A lot of them didn't. But now it's part of the superficial chart, so it can happen. Engine damage, which will slow the vehicle down, make it slow. And then if you get a 2 engine damage, then it counts as immobilized. Immobilized, pretty much the same. If you get 2 immobilizations, the vehicle's knocked out. On fire, pretty much the same. You got to make a morale check, put the fire out. So a few different options. And as far as the full damage chart, that hasn't changed. That's the same. So miscellaneous. There's a few things that I didn't want to dedicate a whole slide to. Just kind of go over. Points costs of units have changed. Most tanks and vehicles are much cheaper, which allows people to bring more tanks, especially since they're able to spam them in an armored platoon. Some units went up in cost. Artillery, some infantry, like Gurkhas, went up a little bit. Another change, green troops. A lot of people used to take green. It was pretty cool usage. I got a whole bunch of home guard that I built for green, But now, instead of upgrading on a 5 or 6, they only upgrade on a 6. So much less likely that you're going to get anything extra out of them. So they're not as useful as they used to be. As we said before, vehicle mounted weapons now fire half rate against units on the table. So the Daka Stuart, all your Daka tanks got a severe hit. The only good part is shooting is much more effective now in version 3. So you're much more likely to get the wounds than you were before. A lot of times, if you had a Daka Stuart that's shooting 18 or 23 shots and you fired at a unit, they went down. And now you're hitting on 7s, which meant you may get 1 or 2 hits. A lot of times you didn't even wound a person. Now it's at the point where they make a decision. Do I go down or don't I go down? Or if you're in point blank, down doesn't help you. Being down against point blank against a tank is suicide. Trust me. I know. Especially against a Panzer III with 12 shots. Yep, that's bad news. The flak fire is going to stay the same though. So machine guns have gotten a little bit of an increase in fire rate. So shooting against airplanes is very effective, to the point where you don't see air observers at all anymore. I mean, occasionally somebody will bring one just to be thematic, but the air observer, unless they make some more changes to them, they're pretty much non-existent. Like I say, machine gun rate is increased by 1, which makes the German MMG team very good. 7 shots from a 50-point unit. You set it down in hard cover. Yeah, that's really good. If I'm a German player, I'm bringing at least 1 MMG team because they're just that good. So, and that, folks, is it. That's all I've got. If you got anything you want to ask or questions, comments, please put them down in the section below, and I will do my best to respond to them. I'm going to try to get a live battle report this weekend. I've got a game coming up that I'm going to record. I got some new equipment. I'm going to try to do some multiple camera views, and we'll see how that goes. So, like I say, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Everybody have a good day.